nice to be with you today. I am Dave Johnson. I'm head of the IT division of Schneider Electric. And for those of you who don't know what that means, we lead the data center activity for Schneider. We also take care of edge IT applications, distributed IT applications. So we do a lot of things around secure power and cooling. We do the software and services that go with that, all in the sort of the data center space. If we look at our mission, kind of inside of Schneider and in the world in general, I think that no matter what company you're from, you're going through some sort of digital transformation. Either you or your customers, or we're kind of all going through this. We look at our role as trying to make sure that we can enable those transformations by keeping all your systems, your networks, your processes up and running and resilient. So that's sort of our role in this world of powering the digital economy. So in essence, we're ensuring life is on in the digital world. So I've been in our industry since around 1989. So I've seen a lot of things. There's been a lot of disruption, a lot of innovation in our industry to handle the disruption, or to cause the disruption, I guess, in some cases. I want to talk a little bit about one of those disruptions that we're dealing with today, and that's edge computing, and kind of put it in perspective against this thing we had called cloud computing. We'll talk through that a little bit. And I don't have a clicker, or do I? Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so let's see if this is working. Did I pick up the right one? There was two on the table. So my looks like did I get this or not? Okay, I'll just raise my hand and something magical will happen, right? Okay, so so edge computing is driving a lot more complexity. Right? It's driving a lot of complexity in our world. Now, but let's think back a little ways and look back in history a bit in the data center business. It's really just been a little over 10 years. It was 2006 that we came up with this term called cloud computing. It was just 2006. It's when the term came about. It's also when Amazon Web Services was started. It's really not that long ago. But as cloud computing kind of got some momentum, got to the point where we said, well, everything's going to go to the cloud, right? Everything is going to go to the cloud. There's going to be a handful of data centers, these big giant data centers. Everything's going to go there. All the other data centers are going to go away. Well, along comes the need for, we heard in the last session, the discussion around driverless cars and sort of the problems that could arise if you start to have these applications, especially a critical application where I'm going to either hit that poor deer that was talked about in the panel or something worse, like a person. We can't have that. We can't have everything going back to the cloud. So we come up with this thing called edge computing. And now we've moved from this central cloud sort of vision of the world of data centers to this decentralized one, where we've got big data centers, we've got regional data centers, we've got little local micro data centers at the edge, and now we have this big interwoven web of big, small, and little data centers driving more activity, managing more data than we've ever seen in history. So things are getting complex, right? So we're going to talk about how to kind of deal with some of this. To make matters even a little more challenging, today's generation, the new kids on the block, they want everything on all the time. If you were at Jean Pascal's session this morning, he talked about Schneider does a lot to try to go after bringing energy to the 2 billion people that don't have access to good energy. But he also said that people actually have more access to smartphones and all things digital than they do power today. And the current generation, I know my kids would be happier if the power went out at home, but the network was up so they could stay on their phones, right? And that's exactly the opposite of, I mean, for me growing up, power was very important. And as I started getting into the last 10, 20 years of work, if the network went down, that meant I didn't have to do anything at home after I got home, right? I see a lot of nodding heads, right? I think a lot of us have kind of gone through that. But that's not the case today. People want the network up and running. When I was maybe 17 years old, if I did something wrong, punishment for me was give me the car keys, right? You're not driving the car. And so, less kids are starting to dream about driverless cars. They seem to be less interested in that car isn't sort of everything to them. Now the phone is everything to them. And so, imagine the case when you have to go to your daughter and take that phone away. I actually came to the conclusion, I do have a daughter, she's 21 now, but if I contemplated taking that phone away, for me it was harder than, I don't know, cutting off her arm or something. It seemed like it was a worse punishment. So I have a real tough time with this. It's so critical to, and not just teenagers, it's all of us now I think are pretty connected, pretty addicted to being connected and being online. So we have this issue now, we have the cloud, we have these edge data centers, we have micro data centers and regional data centers, and we also have this, there's no tolerance for the network being down. So we have this really complex sort of dilemma situation to deal with. So collectively, we've got to figure out a way to improve availability, improve efficiency, performance on all fronts in this hybrid IT environment that we're in today. So I'd like to talk about maybe how to tackle this challenge a little bit. So let's look at the types of companies that are dealing with this hybrid IT world. So think about a retail organization, for example. So a typical retailer might have either workloads in getting cloud services from a big provider. They may have some of their core assets in a co-location facility. They may have their own central large data center somewhere. And they probably also have some assets in their regional corporate offices. They may have some distribution centers where they have little, maybe even modular data centers that are managing the distribution activities. But the real interesting place is the local edge, or what's going on inside the stores. It used to be, we've had IT in the stores for years. But what's happening is in retail, there's a lot of technology going into the stores to give the customers a digital experience and to compete with Amazon, right? So you have things like augmented reality. You have smart mirrors, smart digital mirrors, smart dressing rooms. I was also in a French decathlon store recently and watched them how they take all of the things that you want to buy, they put it in a bin, and there's RFID tags on all the things that you're buying. They scan the whole basket at once, and they instantly know what the price is. So this technology is becoming super rich in the store and super critical, by the way, also. So it's not just about logging transactions and doing having basic IT capabilities. It's really about supporting the core customer experience. So these things can't go down. So this is the type of thing a retail organization is dealing with. But if we look at, we've got a study here, some numbers here from 451, a study the 451 group did, and what this says here is if you look at assets in central data centers or remotely in closets and server rooms, assets that are in co-location or workloads that are put out to the cloud, everybody, this is a survey across all segments and industries. Everybody's dealing with this. So retail is an example, but the reality is most companies everywhere, in every geography, and every region are dealing with this complexity. So our bold idea, we have this theme of bold ideas at the conference. I hope that's something we're picking up on. But our bold idea is to take some of the tools that we used to use for central data centers. Do people in the room know what DSIM is? And most people know what DSIM is. So data center infrastructure management. This was traditional software that was used to manage data centers, and typically relatively large data centers. So the bold idea here today is take that software, turn it into something cloud-based, and use that to manage your whole hybrid ecosystem here of IT. This is how you deal with this complexity. And I'll tell you kind of how we got to this. This was not just us being sort of smart and we came up with this approach. We were going through the process of building a cloud-based offer. And our thought was we'd get some of these advantages. I'll talk to them in a minute. Some of the advantages of going to a cloud-based architecture versus on-premise software. And when we did it, we started testing it out in the marketplace. We found that there was much more interest in companies that had IT that was distributed than any of our big data center customers. And I can tell you that the DSIM market, we became a leader with maybe one other company, one or two other companies that really came to the top of the DSIM market, but it never got to be a big market. It's a very small market. So we get this differentiation, we get to talk about it and brag about how we're rated in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner and things like that. But it never became a big deal. But what's happened as we've kind of deployed these systems, these cloud-based systems, is our customers that have resources that are really scattered are loving this. And because they don't have IT staff. If you think about it, it makes much more sense. If I walk into a big data center, it's very nice to have software to manage, see what's going on. But I can also see what's going on. I can walk around. I can feel the heat. I can see a red light flashing. So the need isn't really as big. Plus, a lot of these bigger companies that have big data centers, they have their own capabilities to build their own applications to monitor what's going on. Now, if you take a cloud-based system, so it's interesting how we got there. So we figured this out really by throwing the software out there and seeing this interest in the distributed side. Now, if you go to a cloud-based architecture, you get some benefits. They're shown here. So you see, we can start to deal with big amounts of data. We can remotely manage what's going on, either big data centers or distributed data centers. We can scale this. I remember one of our earlier versions of our on-premise DSIM software. We had initial issues with scalability. We came out with a version for 10,000 nodes, and we said, this is going to be it. This is going to be exactly what we need for large customers. And the first customer that came along wanted, guess how many? 10,001, right? So we had this great scalability option with cloud-based solutions. And of course, we can start to do analytics. We can start to do preventative maintenance. We can look at big amounts of data, look at insights, look at information from your company or your customers' companies if you're a partner, and look at it all together and start to get those insights, do those analytics on what's going on in your facility, but also by comparing it with others. And we can do predictive maintenance. We can fix things before they break. I think you heard a couple of stories like that earlier. So real benefits to moving to these cloud-based systems. Okay. So of course, guess what? We have a cloud-based solution for this bold idea. And for us, it's EcoStruxure. You heard Jean-Pascal introduce it. He kind of warned you that you'd get beat over the head with this a little bit. So I'll do a quick beating and we'll move on. But in the data center and the IT space in particular, when we're talking about going from DSIM to this hybrid IT cloud-based solution, our solution is EcoStruxure IT. And remember, if you look at the chart, it's one of the core domains on the bottom. You're going to find this often in the data center application. But the EcoStruxure IT solution lets you monitor and manage assets. And by the way, it's vendor neutral. So we can monitor all the assets that are sort of in our category, physical infrastructure, these types of things that are supporting data centers and edge IT. We can provide those insights and analytics that go with it at the apps and the analytics later. And we can start to build digital services on top of that. So once we deploy these tools, we can add in things like remote monitoring that utilizes that cloud-based system and get those anticipatory benefits that we've been talking about here. So let's look at this from a couple angles. Let's look at EcoStruxure IT and how it helps us at the edge, and then we'll look at the data center. So at the edge, we've got some unique problems, right? So first of all, if you think about a typical data center, it's pretty well built, pretty secure. If you think of some of the images that come to mind in a big data center, you have great physical security. You can't get in without 6 forms of ID and a blood test in some cases, and you're getting through armed guards. There's levels of redundancy, but at the edge, we're still moving from this world where you had a lot of sort of IT that looked like this, where you had a lot of messy, this sort of mess of cables, these unsecure doors, maybe even access for the custodial staff, the cleaning staff could come in and open a door, and really sort of unsecure. So now we need to, with some of the things that we're talking about here, you need much more resiliency at the edge. Right? If these are going to be dealing with critical things like driverless cars or that digital experience for the customers, it's not really optional to keep this stuff up and running. So we need to improve the physical security. We have to be able to remotely manage. And if I'm going to have hundreds or even thousands of sites, I want a standardized, repeatable solution that I'm deploying out. Okay, so let's, without me sort of answering how do we get there, let me just maybe use a couple examples, a couple of stories to get us through to see how we kind of go after those challenges. Now, this one was mentioned earlier. So Kevin Brown, if you saw his session, he mentioned this retailer that we've worked with that had 2,300 stores, not devices, but 2,300 stores with these kinds of benefits. Huge increase in the stability of the network and what's in the IT in the stores. A big reduction in these sort of false alarms. If you're using traditional management systems today, you get these huge logs of problems. You get lots of false alarms. Our new system, EcoStruxure IT, will deliver the right news at the right time to the right person without all these excess warnings and alarms. As a reminder, this company that we're talking about here saved thousands of hours. They now put those hours right back in the control of the employees. They're helping customers. They're spending their time much more productively. But let's look at another example at the edge, and that we're working with a large university in the southeast part of the US. It's a big university. It's about 50,000 students, 2,500 faculty, 127 connected devices, and 5 very different and distributed campus locations. They don't have IT staff at these locations. But typically, what was happening for them is if something broke, somebody who wasn't technical, who was some local administrative person, would have to say something's beeping, something's broken. They'd have to look at the manufacturer. They'd have to write down the serial number, crawl behind a desk, log this, and start going through a typical experience with a tech support staff, whether it was our stuff or anybody else's. And they would call in and be frustrated and try to work through that. Now they're using our EcoStruxure IT solution. And their experience is that we are taking care of things for them. We are notifying them something's broken, something's on the way to being shipped and installed. And they can deal with this now without the IT staff. We're dealing with things proactively. Huge peace of mind. And this customer has a completely different experience now. There's no more of that sort of typical tech support thing that they had to kind of deal with before. So this is the type of experience change that you're dealing with if you're using a cloud-based management system for hybrid IT like EcoStruxure IT. Okay, so those were a couple examples. So some of the things that you want to do when you're looking at the edge, you're going to need the hardware. You're going to need a more robust solution than maybe before. You had a simple rack and you had your servers, network storage. Maybe it was some sort of unsecure open environment. Now you need something more like a micro data center with a controlled environment, maybe has cooling and redundancy built in, has good physical security, including the processes and people around that. You've got your cloud-based monitoring system. And then ideally, you're building services on top of that. So if I install this system, now I need the digital services that sit on top of that so I can do this remote monitoring and deliver those kinds of benefits. Okay, so now let's look at centralized data centers. So we talked about the edge. And again, what I'm trying to do here is say, as a reminder, is that we're looking at this challenge of the hybrid IT environment, making sure we can do the edge, take care of the edge, and take care of the centralized data centers and everything in between. So think of a big data center in the cloud or a large central corporate data center. These are some of the other things that are a little bit different than the types of things you would see at maybe a tiny edge site. Speed of deployment is a big deal. If you're a co-location company or you're a corporate doing your own data center from a corporate standpoint, you want to get that data center up and running and productive as quickly as possible. Either you want to have revenue coming in from your clients, or you want the utilization from internally starting to happen as quickly as possible. So you need speed of deployment. We're continuing on this. We've talked a lot about the power requirements for IT going up and up and up, right? In the world, because of all this digital activity going on, we got to get better. We have to get better and better at operational efficiency so we can reduce the energy consumption as much as possible. And we need this high level of resilience. We also need a level of risk mitigation for these facilities a little bit higher than we see in other places. Some of the unique needs. So let's look at, again, let's look at an example to see kind of how do we handle this. So Jean-Pascal mentioned this for about 9 seconds this morning, so hopefully we can talk about this for a little bit longer. Pulse data centers in Australia. So Pulse it's a nice client for us because they're using us kind of across the board for a full Schneider experience there. So we worked with them early on in their planning phases. They use a lot of our equipment from a hardware standpoint, both in sort of power and cooling, but also a lot of our management products. They use our building management, they use our power management, and they use our IT management solutions across the board. They are in a place called Toowoomba, if I can pronounce that right. Hopefully there's no Australians in the room to correct me. But Toowoomba, interesting place. It's about 500 meters above sea level. A lot of the surrounding area has a lot of sort of crazy weather in this interior part of Australia where there's dust storms, there's flash floods, flash fires, and earthquakes. But they found this spot where, this location where it isn't so bad and pretty reliable, and it's now a technology park, and they're attracting a lot of clients here. So, but anyway, it was interesting that they went through that experience. They've worked with us on a complete solution. They've deployed some of the new hardware technologies which drive some efficiency, but the management side is really the interesting thing. So they do the building management, the power management, and the IT management. And when Jean-Pascal this morning talked about EcoStruxure for data centers, he kind of highlighted that, those 3 different domains covering that. And Pulse is using that. And because they're doing that, they're finding they're able to offer a 100% SLA to their clients, 100%. They're guaranteeing 100%, not 99.999, but 100% uptime. And they have the confidence to do that because of this solution that they put in place. And a lot of it comes from the software, the management side. Okay, so some of the things, so we talked about an example. So some of the things you want to do when you're talking about a large centralized data center, make sure you're using the latest technologies. On the UPS side, lithium-ion batteries is a big deal right now. So lithium-ion, there's a lot of promise that's coming from that. A lot of benefits, which it will take me probably half an hour to go through, so I won't go through all of them. But it's greener, it's smaller footprint, more efficient, lasts longer, et cetera. There's also the opportunity for the UPS eventually to start helping you with your, on the demand side with peak shaving. There's a promise of even connecting to the grid in the future. So really interesting things that you can do with lithium-ion UPSs now and in the future. We're working with Pulse and other companies to deploy new white space solutions where we're doing interesting things with the pods in a flexible way so that whether you're using Schneider racks or any vendor's racks, you can come in different densities, have things come swap in and out in a very easy, flexible way. Cooling world has changed quite a bit. Most data centers have moved over to air economization, a mix of that with some traditional precision cooling. There's other things that are coming, so it's important that you deploy the latest cooling technologies. But again, for me, the big one here is making sure you do the management systems right so you can get some of these benefits. So that includes the power side, the building side, and the IT management. Okay, so what I've tried to do here this afternoon is go through this challenge we have. We've moved from this thing where we thought everything was going to the cloud, and now we've seen edge computing creep in. And we have people, we have companies that are deploying assets on premise, off site, in the cloud. They're trying to deal with all this. At the same time, we're dealing with this huge demand for keeping the network up and running, everything digital, keep your phone on all the time and everything supporting it, all at the same time. So we have this collective challenge. I think we're all up for it. I think we have the solutions here. It's about using cloud-based architectures. It's about using the latest technologies, making sure you work with companies that have the right expertise. And of course, guess what? We're one of those companies, or if not the company, to work with from an expertise standpoint. And this will help us increase availability, performance, efficiency, and really ultimately simplify this complex hybrid IT world.